Hello, I'm Regina Imburgia. I live in the 14th District, and I'm here to introduce Dr. Paul Connett to you. He traveled 23 hours to come and talk to you here today. He's here to offer his wealth of knowledge about fluoride. I encourage you to ask him questions. In 2010, with two other authors, he published the book, The Case Against Fluoride, which contains 80 pages of references to scientific studies about fluoride. Paul Connett has researched the literature on fluoride's toxicity and the fluoridation debate for 18 years. He believes for too long the toxicity of fluoride compounds has been overlooked by the public health and environmental communities. The Fluoride Action Network was founded in 2000 by Dr. Connett to remedy this imbalance. FluorideAlert.com has the largest database of scientific research. Dr. Connett has given invited presentations on the dangers of fluoridation to legislative and research bodies and local communities in Australia, Canada, Germany, Ireland, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, the UK, and the US. Dr. Paul Connett is a graduate of Cambridge University and holds a PhD in chemistry from Dartmouth College. Since 1983, he taught chemistry at St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York, where he specialized in environmental chemistry and toxicology. Let's see. Last week, you were given information about Hong Kong reducing their recommended fluoride level to 0.5 parts per million. This was due to the fact that when they started their fluoridation process in 1961, fluorosis, which is the outward sign of fluoride toxicity, was at 1%. It went to 59% in 1988, is when they reduced their recommended level to the raw, untreated level we already have in the Dallas water. You have the authority to vote to halt the addition of hydrofluoric acid to our water to raise the fluoride level. With this authority comes responsibility to have all the facts possible before you make your decision. You have been invited by email to a dinner this evening to hear Dr. Connett, and I also am happy to add Dr. Connett has agreed to return to Dallas and debate this issue with any promoter of fluoridation, which would include anyone that this council or the Dallas Morning News can find to defend their position in an open public debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Your next speaker, Joe Stokes. Joe Stokes. Not present. Elijah Wash. I'm sorry.
If Mr. Stokes isn't here, if Mr. Connett wants to take his place, because I'm not sure you're going to be able to speak early in the morning, so since you're a guest, I'll let you take that spot. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Paul Connett. I live in Binghamton, New York. In short, fluoridation is unusual, unethical, unnatural, unnecessary, unsafe, ineffective, and there are better alternatives of ways of fighting tooth decay in low-income children. I'll go through these one at a time. It's unusual. Most countries in the world do not fluoridate their water, including 97% of Europe. It's unethical. We should never use the public water supply to deliver medication, for obvious reasons. Once the fluoride or medicine is put in the water, you can't control the dose, you can't control who it goes to, and you're violating the individual's right to informed consent to medication. It's unnatural. If you look at the level of fluoride in mother's milk, baby's first meal, there's very little there. The concentration is extremely low, 0.004 parts per million. This means that a bottle-fed baby in a fluoridated community like Dallas is getting about 200 times more fluoride than nature intended. That is reckless in my view. It's unnecessary. Fluoride is not a nutrient. There's not one single process in the body that needs fluoride. And most people now agree that if it works at all, it works topically. It's unsafe. There is no adequate margin of safety to protect all our citizens and all our children from known harmful effects. I'm most concerned about fluoride's impact on the brain. There have now been 37 studies which indicate an association between fairly modest exposure to fluoride and lowered IQ. In 9 studies, the level at which fluoride did this was less than 3 parts per million. That offers no adequate margin of safety to protect all our children against lowered IQ. It's ineffective. The World Health Organization publishes data on tooth decay in 12-year-olds, and since the 1960s, tooth decay has been coming down as fast in non-fluoridated countries as fluoridated ones. The largest survey ever conducted in the United States showed no statistically significant difference in tooth decay between children who've grown up in fluoridated communities and non-fluoridated communities. And a recent study from 2009 showed that the researchers could find no relationship between the amount of fluoride actually swallowed by the child and the level of tooth decay. Fluoridation should have ended in 1999 when the CDC admitted that the main way that fluoride worked is topically. It works on the surface of the teeth, not from inside the body. If that is the case, it doesn't make sense to swallow fluoride, and it gives you no justification to force it on people that don't want it. Finally, I would recommend that you look at the Child Smile program in Scotland, which is not fluoridated, where they brought down tooth decay cost-effectively in low-income families, low-income children, without forcing fluoride on the total population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cadane.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Connett, for being here and coming such a long distance. Let me ask you a question. Explain to me the difference between the fluoridation we're using and pharmaceutical fluoridation.
Well, pharmaceutical fluoride could either be sodium fluoride, a pure compound of fluoride. That would be expensive, and you would have to find a different delivery system. You'd have to use bottled water with fluoride added to it. That you could afford to do. That would allow you to control the dose, control the concentration, and not force it on people that don't want it. But a cheap supply of fluoride is the waste product of the phosphate fertilizer industry. Now, that stuff cannot be dumped into the sea by international law. It's too concentrated to dump locally, but it's one of the vagaries of the hazardous waste regulations in this country that if someone buys a hazardous waste, it becomes a product. And that's how public water authorities are able to put this hazardous waste into the drinking water. The important thing is that this is not a pure substance. It's contaminated with all kinds of things, including arsenic, lead, for which there are no safe levels at all. So by using these chemicals, at the very least, you're increasing cancer risk in the United States to the whole population. Also, the same rock that's mined for phosphate in Florida is also mined for uranium. So there are trace amounts of radioactive isotopes also in this mixture that we add to the water.
So, and also the maximum amount we're able to use is 0.7 particles. Is that not correct?
Yes.
And we're already using 0.5.
The existing regulations allow you to use between 0.7 and 1.2 watt parts per million. And that range is really to take into account climate. So Dallas being very hot, you're at the lowest end, which is 0.7. But if I understood correctly from a previous speaker, that the level that you actually have in your water with no addition is 0.5. And so it really doesn't make sense to jack that up by 0.2, and especially running the risk of adding these other toxic substances into the water.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why should we take your word over many individual dentists and the government agencies that have endorsed fluoridation? Specifically, please comment on the much-reported statement that the CDC has described fluoridation as one of the top public health achievements in the 20th century.
Yes, that statement from the CDC is quoted nearly somewhere, nearly every day, either in Australia, New Zealand, or one of the other fluoridated countries. Little do people realize when they make that statement that it's not the whole CDC that said that. not the 20,000 employees with all the experts on toxicology, risk assessment, various disciplines in medicine that made that statement. It came from the Oral Health Division, which is just 30 people, and they're all essentially, if they're trained at all, they're dentally trained, and their mission is to promote fluoridation. So them stating from an agency or a department whose mission is to promote fluoridation, for them to say that it's the best thing since sliced bread is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And what we need, of course, is people from the CDC who have medical and toxicological qualifications to make a statement about this practice. But we never get it. All the statements from the CDC are from this Oral Health Division. Now, as far as whether you trust me or trust them, I would say the following. Every single argument that I make is backed up with the scientific literature. I published a whole book on that with 80 references. Every single argument is backed up. And after 3 years of publication, there's been not one written scientific response to that book. So I would say the difference between me and them is I have science to back up my arguments. They have opinions. These endorsements that you hear about ad nauseum were started in 1950. In 1950, before any trial of fluoridation had been completed, before there was any significant health data in the literature, the U.S. Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation. Because of their power, their influence, that triggered a whole series of endorsements from the ADA, the APHA, the AMA, and so on, nearly all the dental and medical authorities. But again, none of those endorsements came with any solid science to demonstrate that it was either safe or effective. So I think you have to take these endorsements with a pinch of salt. Now, what has happened since 1950 is that what purported to be a scientific decision has fossilized into a belief system. When students go to dental school, they're only taught one side of this debate. They only hear the pro-fluoridation arguments. When those dental students graduate and go to their own practices, they're so busy treating patients that they don't have time to do what 3 retired professors do, and that is to study the literature in some kind of depth. So unfortunately what is happening is that individuals are simply parroting what they're told by their professional bodies and various government health agencies, which I believe, as I said, their position has fossilized into a belief system. And if I were just to conjecture as to why they're spending today so much effort, so much money, so much political clout, continuing to promote this outdated practice, it is, I believe, a fear of losing credibility.
Okay.
Having
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I want to make sure we get Mr. Cadane's.
Let me finish. Let me ask you this. Explain to me how fluoride prevents cavities. How does fluoride prevent cavities?
Well, I think everybody agrees that the fluoride ion toughens the enamel. It makes the enamel harder and makes that enamel more resistant to acid attack from sugar, which is broken down by bacteria in the mouth. Now, the key thing is this, that as I said earlier, the CDC admitted in 1999 that the predominant benefit, the way that fluoride worked, was topical, not systemic. In other words, it works on the outside of the tooth surface by this mechanism, not from inside the body. And the moment that they admitted that, it removed the whole rationale for putting fluoride in the water, which is you're meant to swallow, and removed the rationale for forcing this on people that don't want it. It's the height of arrogance for government bodies to force citizens to take a medicine if they don't want it, especially if they can't demonstrate overwhelming effectiveness and long-term safety studies, which they can't.
Okay, then why is 0.5 not enough fluoride to be effective? Why do we need 0.7?
If you believe what I'm saying, It's not effective to swallow fluoride, period. If you want fluoride, brush it on your teeth with fluoridated toothpaste and spit it out. It doesn't do it any good to swallow it, whether you swallow it at 0.2, 0.5, 0.7, or 1 parts per million. They simply got the mechanism wrong. They got the rationale for doing this wrong.
Okay, then I'm going to be quick, Mayor. Why do certain toothpaste that have fluoride suggest if you swallow this, get to the emergency room?
Well, there's no question whatsoever that fluoride is toxic. It's a very toxic substance. So whilst there's no evidence that it does any good to us by swallowing it, there's plenty of evidence that it interferes with biochemical processes, inhibits enzymes, and so on. So that was an FDA requirement which says if you should accidentally swallow more than the recommended amount, contact your medical help or poison control center. Now, it's interesting to see what the recommended amount is. It's a pea-sized amount that's on the pack. A pea-sized amount is the recommended amount. That is a 0.5 milligram of fluoride, which is the equivalent of a glass of water, of fluoridated water. And imagine if the FDA required that same warning on the tap. Keep out of the reach of children under 6. Do not swallow, that's also on there, do not swallow. And if you should accidentally drink more than 1 glass of water, get medical help or contact a poison control system. It's Kafkaesque, these two different worlds. The world of toothpaste, which the FDA does regulate, and the world of fluoridated water, which the FDA does not regulate.
Thank you.
Okay, but at 0.5 parts, we're getting all the fluoride we ever need.
Yeah, our kids are being overexposed to fluoride. When they started fluoridation, they expected that 10% of the children would get a condition called dental fluorosis, a mottling of the enamels, discoloration of the enamel.
Yeah.
In 2010, the CDC reported that 41% of American children now have this, age 12 to 15, now have this condition of dental fluorosis, and not all in its very mild form. 8.6% have mild, which is 50% of the enamel impacted. 3.6% have moderate or severe, which is 100% of the enamel impacted. And what is also interesting is that in an earlier report, the CDC found that black and Hispanic children in America are more susceptible to dental fluorosis and presumably fluoride's toxicity than white children.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Connett, for coming such a long distance to give us your expert opinion.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cadane. Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Doctor,